one.
Right. Welcome to session 5, Cryptology in France, Strengths and Weaknesses. For its first participation in this event, ARCSI is going to present the history of French cryptology, 1700 till today, its emblematic figures, its striking innovations, and its often salutary setbacks. The chair of this session is General Jean-Louis Desvignes, and I'm going to send it over to you to introduce the panel.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am General Jean-Louis Desvignes of the Association of the Reservists of Cipher and Information Security, ARCSI. Next, please. Yes, next, please. So, next, okay. ARCSI was created in 1928 by the reserve officers of the cipher sections, including the glorious actors of the successes of French cryptology during the Great War. Over the years, it has gradually opened up to new population and other specialties. The evolution of telecommunication and encryption techniques, combined with the development of computing, brought into the great family of cipher all those exercising a technical, scientific, or administrative function aimed at protecting sensitive information. Today, ARCSI brings together multidisciplinary skills likely to be mobilized in the service of the country, its smooth running, its security, and its sovereignty. Next, please. ARCSI is honored to count or having counted among its members illustrious figures in cryptology such as David Kahn and great experts Jean-Jacques Quisquater, Michel Hugon, Louis Guillot, and also Nicolas Courtois, David Nakache, Tony Rutkowski, who will appear in this symposium. Next. Among the many French associations dealing with the cyber security, ARCSI, the oldest, is unique to be interested both in the history of the science of secrecy and in the issue related to what is called InfoSec. This is the first time that ARCSI has dared to present itself at this prestigious symposium. It was our American friend Tony Rutkowski who convinced me to give it a try. For the first time, we thought we would give you a broad overview of the history of French cryptology with its ups and its downs. I would like to thank the selection committee for their trust. 4 speakers will follow. Next. Philippe Guillot first exercised his talents as a cryptologist engineer at Thomson CSF. Then, in a second life, as a researcher of history in cryptology in Paris 8 University. He will tell you about a prosperous period which shows the efficiency of black cabinets of the 18th century. Then of a darker period sanctioned by the great defeat of 1870, fortunately provoking a salutary rebound. Agathe Couderc, PhD candidate at Sorbonne University, Paris, specialized in intelligence history and international relations. She will evoke the gold period of the First World War, in which France entered, according to David Kahn himself, as the best prepared state to use technical intelligence, naturally including cryptology. I will come back to talk to you then about a new disastrous period, the one which will lead us to the defeat of 1940, and then, fortunately, to a new rebound, which will see France be in the forefront of Western countries and offer the world a new technology. To plead French excellence at the dawn of the new century, I appeal to the impartiality of our illustrious Belgian companion, Jean-Jacques Quisquater, who had already the opportunity to speak in this cenaculum and who has several times worked with French teams. Unfortunately, Jean-Jacques can't be with us, but he has recorded his presentation. Without further ado, I give the floor to Philippe Guillot.
Thank you, Jean-Louis. My purpose is to present a selection of 4 figures whose activity has been important in the field of development of cryptology in France from the Renaissance to World War I. Please, the next slide. Next again. Above all, we should pay tribute to French mathematicians like Fermat, Fourier, Laplace, Poincaré, and Poisson. Centuries ago, they discovered mathematics of statistical analysis and signal analysis, which are fundamental to our modern cryptology and digital media. The first character present is François Vieta. During the Renaissance, he was appointed codebreaker when Henry IV became King of Navarre in 1589. He was the author of numerous codebooks. He was also the first author in France to present a symbolization of algebra while he studied the relationships between roots and coefficients of algebraic equations. Shortly before his death, he left to the Prime Minister Sully a text on cryptology where he details the method he used to recover plain text from cryptogram between Spain and Italy during the European War of Religion. He initiated a deductive approach, which he called the infallible rule. This rule can be stated as follows. Please, next slide. Among 3 consecutive letters, there is always 1 or more of the 5 vowels A, E, R, O, or U. This rule is especially infallible in the Spanish language. Vieta explains how it works on the monoalphabetic encryption. The first job was to find the vowels, and the historian of science Peter Pesik attributed to this specific search the choice of Vieta to represent the unknowns of algebraic equation by vowels, while the present use of X, Y, and Z was initiated by Descartes a few decades later. At this point, Vieta could not entirely disregard the use of significance. Once the vowels has been determined, common sense, intuition, speculation, and hard brain work are still to play their role to play, making the use of the context and meaning of the messages. Please, next slide. The second figure is Antoine Rossignol. During the reign of Louis XIV, Antoine Rossignol first learned mathematics and then became fascinated with cryptology, which he learned from Italian books. In April 1628, Prince Henri de Condé led the siege of the Protestant town of Rielmont. He sent for Rossignol to solve a message intercepted from a peasant who was trying to flee the town. The message contained a poem of such poverty that Rossignol had the idea to apply a Cardano grid from probable words. The message asked for help from the Huguenots in Montauban, indicating that Rielmont was running out of ammunition. The city surrendered the next day. Strengthened by this success, he was called by Richelieu and deciphered for him in October of the same year the message sent by the Protestant besieged in La Rochelle, who were waiting for supplies by sea from the English allies. La Rochelle capitulated after 13 months of siege. Rossignol would lead the first French cipher service. He worked on the decryption of messages within the Black Cabinet in charge of the interception of postal dispatches. Rossignol's main work was the creation of the Grand Chiffre of Louis XIV, the first disordered codebook of 587 words of group of words. He would keep it secret for more than 200 years. A smaller one of 265 groups was intended for subordinates. The use of this codebooks required two tables, one order according to words for encryption and the other according to codes for decryption. His son Charles Bonaventure Rossignol would take over, and later his grandson Antoine Bonaventure Rossignol. Please, the next slide. The third figure is Claude Chappe. He gave his name to the optical telegraph, which was used throughout France and the North African colonies during the first half of the 19th century. Each station has three articulated arms painted in black, a central arm called the regulator, and two lateral arms called indicators. The information is carried by the relative position of the regulator and the indicator according to one of the 184 possible positions. The first Paris-Lille line, completed in 1795, consisted of 16 stations and could transmit a message of 25 words in less than 15 minutes. The position of the arms was visible to all, which made it necessary to use a confidential code. Secrecy was based on a very hierarchical organization of a military discipline. The codebook was kept secret and the meaning was known only to the station managers at the end of the lines. The message remained totally incomprehensible to all intermediaries. Please, next slide. Between 1834 and 1836, the telegraph was exploited by bankers from Bordeaux, Louis and François Blanc, who had the idea of using the speed of the telegraph to play the stock market and transmit buying or selling information according to the trend before the official information arrived by mail. Here is how the Gazette des Tribunaux of December the 10th, 1836 describes the operation. An agent from Paris transmitted to Tours, a city located between Paris and Bordeaux, poste restante, effects such as gloves, etc. The color of these objects indicated the rise or fall. On seeing this object, the employee of the telegraph gave an agreed signal. The employee in Tours sent the signal indicative of an error, which was repeated on all the line and did not appear in the received dispatches. Informed by a third agent, our two stooges were sure to win and could pay their accomplices with gratitude. The affair was revealed as a result of numerous mistakes made on purpose by the telegraph administration. Its last use was a light version transportable on the back of a mule during the Crimean War, and which allowed the station to be moved according to military operations. The Chappe telegraph was the first organized telecommunication system. It disappeared little by little from 1847 onwards and was definitely replaced in 1855 by the electric telegraph, which had the advantage of also operating at night and in foggy weather, and whose underwater cables made it possible to send messages overseas. Next slide, please. The most important figure of the French cryptology is undoubtedly Jean-Guillaume Hubert François Victor Alexandre Auguste Kerckhoff von Neuwenhof. He was born in 1835 in Holland, in an influential family in a Flemish duchy. He begins in religious studies at the minor seminary of Aachen and then studied ancient and modern languages. He is interested in history, archaeology, and mathematics. In 1883, at the age of 47, he published his famous article, La Cryptographie Militaire, which was to become a milestone. He builds the foundations of what will be the cryptology at the dawn of the First World War. The article is a real complete course of cryptography, including a historical reminder, the use of cryptography in the context of the use of the telegraph, as well as the analysis of the various processes in use at that time. He shows how much the use of cryptography changes with the use of telegraph. It is no longer a question of protecting the exchange between two particular actors, but of protecting a system of communication. It is necessary to distinguish, he writes, between a system of encrypted writing imagined for a momentary exchange of letters between a few isolated persons and a method of cryptography intended to regulate for an unlimited time the correspondence of the various heads of the army. Please, next slide. He states the requirements that such cryptographic system must meet. The most paradoxical is that of non-secrecy. The administration must absolutely renounce secret methods. The value of a cryptographic system intended for the need of war is in inverse proportion to the secrecy that its handling or its composition requires. A cipher is good as long as it remains undecipherable by the master himself who invented it. Arcipsi secreta magistro, an art secret to the master himself. This requirement excludes codebooks, grids, or other framing whose lose all security as soon as they are captured by the enemy. The security must be based on a key that can be easily modified according to the correspondence. In case of compromise, it is the key that must change, not the mechanism. This requirement would be respected little by the German Empire during the First World War, allowing the British and the French to access the content of the messages. Kerckhoff also attached a great importance to decryption, that is, deciphering without the key, and its preponderant role in testing the soundness of an encryption method. I quote, "I am amazed to see how scholars and professors teaching and recommending for the use of war, a system for which a decryptor of little experience will certainly find the key in less than an hour. The first requirement is that a system must be, I quote, materially, if not mathematically, indecryptable. The term materially indecryptable must be understood here as indecryptable in practice, with regard to how long the dispatch must remain secret. In the military context, this time is never very long. The mathematical weakness is not a problem if this weakness is not practically exploitable. In his article, each procedure described is systematically accompanied by a method of attack and a study of its practical difficulty. Kerckhoff's article would have a rich posterity in France and would give rise to work in cryptology, which would place France in a dominant position at the end of the 19th century. Between 1883 and 1914, 24 works of brochure on cryptology would be published in France against only 6 in Germany. A real French school of cryptology was created around the École Polytechnique. Please, next slide. Let me quote some major names. Etienne Bazery improves the Jefferson cylinder. He's a great practical cryptanalyst. He solved the Grand Chiffre of Louis XIV, the Panizzardi telegram during the Dreyfus affair, as well as the cipher used by the conspirator in 1892 for the Ravachol trial. Paul Louis Eugène Valerio published 10 articles in the Journal of Military Science, as well as a work in 2 volumes on cryptography, essay on encryption methods. He intervened as an expert in the Dreyfus trial and decrypted the correspondence of King Henry IV. Félix Marie de Lastel is the author of a cipher published in 1893 in his book, The New Cryptography. The cipher is composed by a substitution and transposition. He is also in 1901 of an elementary treaty of cryptography. Gaëtan de Viaris formulated the polyalphabetic cipher in 2 equations. In 1914, France was in a strong position in the field of cryptography, and I give now the floor to Agathe Couderc, who will tell you how it was then used.
Thank you, Philippe, and well, hello everyone. I want to express my gratitude to the selecting committee for giving me the opportunity to present here today. It is with great pleasure that I will now take you through what happened during the Great War. France does indeed have a very strong position in 1914 in the cryptologic area. Its military cipher services are top-notch, and its naval counterparts start their cryptanalysis work from the middle of January 1916. These are new services, and with them comes an innovative way of collecting and dealing with its intelligence. So next slide, please. Twice, I guess. Once more, please. Thank you very much. My aim here is to present to you a quick panorama of French cipher services during the Great War, that is to say, the sections that dealt with cryptography and cryptanalysis. To do so, I will use documents from French and British archives mostly, as well as memoirs from the main icons of the French cipher services, whose names were on the former slide. But anyway, that is to say, François Cartier, who is the head of the cipher section during the cabinet of the Ministry of War, Marcel Givierge, who heads the cipher section of the General Headquarters, or in French, Grand Quartier Général, and Georges Jean Parent, amongst others. It is tricky, and somehow one could consider it a paradox that we know of them when these people worked in the shadows, in secret, and against time itself. First, I want to take you all through the process which enabled the French Army and Navy cipher services to emerge and evolve into some blossoming intelligence institutions during the war. Next, I will deal with what it meant for these services to secretly work with Allied cipher services during the war. Finally, I will ask a question that echoed through pop cultures these last 2 years and wonder who lives, who dies, who tells the story in the cipher point of view. And by doing so, I will explore the links between icons and memory from a national point of view to an international one. So next slide, please. And first, let's talk about the birth and the missions of French cipher services throughout the war. What is crucial to understand about the French cipher services is that the military cipher section appeared during peacetime in the cabinet of the Minister of War, as is shown on the chart here. Another cipher section also existed in the Navy Ministry, the Cabinet and Corresponding Bureau. Both of these services were to encipher and decipher the messages from and to their departments. In other words, in peacetime, their main aim was to protect the national communications. When war broke in August 1914, a new cipher section was created in the General Headquarters, as well as new sections in the French armies. They too had to protect the comms. But indeed, as it was a time of war now, they also could, or had to, attack enemy communication and try to break the enemy codes and ciphers. The French Navy, for a while, did not have enough people to engage in code breaking as well. They relied on the French Ministry of War to give them intelligence regarding naval operation, movement of ships, and so on. And it went on like that until 1916. When a new Ministry of Navy was nominated. Lucien Lacaze, that's his name, was eager to create within the Navy Department a naval intelligence service that could intercept and decipher enemy messages. And so to enable such sections to blossom all around the Mediterranean Sea, he created the Navy Cipher Auxiliary Commissioners that were sent on ships and in stations on shore to deal with the intercepted telegrams. Next slide, please. What we can see now is the growth of cipher services in the French army during the war. The x-axis is the years, the y-axis is the number of officers in these services. These numbers come from administrative reports and from Givierge's historical essay. The overall growth is quite constant and tends to accelerate from 1918. This is linked to the fact that there are more and more cipher officers in the various French armies, and especially in the subordinate units, such as divisions and corps, starting March 1918. Such a growth can also be observed in the Navy cipher sections, especially with the cipher auxiliary commissioners at a quicker rate in 1918 as well. Moreover, the multiplication of these second units is also linked with the battlefield theatres that multiplied during the war. There are sections created in Italy in late 1917, or one that follows the French Middle East Army, etc., etc. Not more than 100 officers are in these services in France. These cipher services expanded in the French army as well as in the French Navy because they were very efficient and because the French general staff understood their crucial importance and what they could achieve. David Kahn himself described the French cipher sections as one of the best cryptological units throughout the war. Indeed, French cipher members managed to read German telegrams from 1914 to 1918 continuously, although from time to time they had to stop and think. I think what's quite formidable with the services in that they learned throughout the war to balance efficiency, accuracy, and secrecy. It was not always easy. They sometimes had to remind the commanding officers of their secrecy requirements, and they also had to fight to keep some of their officers in place when there was a need of commanding officers on the front. But they ended the war as a formidable intelligence service. Now that we've talked about the cipher services evolutions, let's deal with the second part of my presentation. So next slide, please. And that is to say the secret cooperations with allied services. To start, let's go with the French and British cooperation, secret cooperation during the war. During the Secret Staff Talk of 1911 and 1912, it is agreed that French and British forces will have a common code, English, French, or EF for the armies, BG for the navies. These allied cryptographic systems enable them to communicate with each other in a secure way. Their cooperation also deals with the SIGINT interests, as is shown in the document on screen. This letter is written from the cipher officer in OB, that is to say the cipher services of the General Headquarters of the British Expeditionary Force in France, to MO5A, which is the first name of what will be known afterwards as MI1B. What we can read here is that the French mission attached to GHQ have informed me that French GHQ have succeeded in solving and obtaining the keys of intercepted cipher messages up to 2 days ago. I hope to get information of keys employed up to date. From the beginning of the war, the French and British Army cipher services exchange elements, and so here keys, but they sometimes also give each other pieces of information on the systems the German and the Austrian used. This cryptologic alliance is very strong in the first months of the war, but when they are not attacking the same set of codes as ciphers, the British tend not to give that much information to their French counterparts. John Ferris underlines the fact that the British weren't as helpful as the French in the Middle East, mostly because they didn't want anyone to fully grasp what was happening there. On next slide, we'll start with another important alliance for French cipher services, which is the one with American corporations. In 2017, Betsy Morales-Smoot wrote a brilliant article in Intelligence and National Security on the alliance between American, British, and French cipher services and how the three of them were working closely together. On this slide here, we can see a letter from French diplomat that is asking that Herbert Yardley would be granted access to the French cipher service. As we can see here, Yardley is sent in France in order to study various codes and cipher employed in cable transmission, and it would be wonderful if he were to be put in touch with Colonel Cartier, who was then the head of the cipher section in the cabinet of the Ministry of War. This alliance between French and American was much more generous than what was developed between American and British naval crypto. In some way, French military and naval cipher experts were more enthusiastic to the appeal of instructing the Americans in every possible way than the British Room 40. What we can gather is that the alliance between the French and American services was deeply appreciated by the Americans as well, because what I take as proof are the medals that are awarded to Cartier at the end of the war, the Army Distinguished Service Medal and the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. More to come afterwards. But let's talk for a few seconds, actually, of the other alliance between French cipher services and other cipher services. The alliance between France and Russia and France and Italy also lead to exchange in cipher and code knowledge, but the Russian military and the Italian service were far less efficient, and it was more of a one-way street in a way, because the French gave them many elements, but these allies were not as good as them. Two examples can sum this up. In 1916, the French cipher, Cartier, was adamant on the specific need for a cipher mission to Russia in order to maintain the security of the Allied communication. The second example deals with the Allied SIGINT station in Italy that is conjured up by British and French services in 1917-1918 and manned by their own experts such as Nigel de Grey. These alliances relied on very good cryptologists, and we will now take a few minutes to explore the delicate balance between icons, memory, and secrecy. So next slide, please. Let's start with the balance between shedding light and casting shadows. The French cipher services did have a role in the final victory of the Entente and its allies. Still, it was important to keep this war a secret. In other words, what these people did and how efficient French SIGINT was to remain classified. They were not allowed to publish anything about what they did during the war, but some of them wrote their memoirs and kept it locked in a box for a few years. Others gave conferences in the army during the between the war period, such as the former head of the GQG, or General Headquarters in French, section, Marcel Givierge. After 1945, we can see that many other memoirs are published, and this is because secrecy was no longer needed as the cryptology had become mechanical, and what had happened in 1914-1918 was no longer relevant from a technical point of view. Thus, people published some of their memoirs, and it was even possible to organize a meeting between French and former French and German cryptologists in 1968, 50 years after the end of the Great War. I was talking earlier of secrecy, the need for meeting with people with the same experience of the secret war, who were frowned upon by the soldiers back from the trenches and had been feeling as if they were running out of time every day of the war, was what prompted the creation of two reserve associations in which gathered former members of French cipher sections. These associations were then called AORCs and AORIC, names on the chart here in green, I guess. The first one is for army members, the second for former Navy auxiliary cipher commissioners. These associations were created in 1928, and Givierge was not a big fan of the AORC's creation because he feared that it would endanger the secret dealings of the states. But then Article 17 of the Charter of this friendly gathering assured complete secrecy regarding active cipher service matters. Three names do live on right now because these men wrote about their part in the war, which was massive. And so on next slide, please, you can see pictures of François Cartier and Marcel Givierge. Cartier's souvenirs were published mostly after the war and actually after Cartier's death mainly. So some of his memory are blurred and do not really concur with other documents we might find in archives, but it may be because those memories were written after the Great War without any notes. On the right side of the slide, you can see Marcel Givierge. He's most famous for his course in cryptography, a French document first published in the 20s that was circulated in the French army during the between the wars era and was, as you can see, translated in English in 1934. He also wrote memoirs that are held in the French National Library and an historical essay on the cipher services from the creation to 1921, which is very useful for people like me who want to understand how this all works. The last name that lives on is that of Georges Jean Painvin, on next slide, who was most efficient and the most brilliant cipher expert of the Great War. He was head of the deciphering unit in the cipher section of the Cabinet of the War Minister from 1916 to 1918. And the quote here is from Yardley's History of the American Black Chamber. We can see here that he thinks that Georges Painvin was the great cipher genius in France. He grew to be fast friend with him, and Painvin's instruction and inspiration were to stand Yardley in good stead when later, from 1919 to 1929, he directed the energies of a group of cryptographers. This quote is quite wonderful, as we can read here that not only Painvin had an amazing brain, but he was very friendly also with allies. To sum up, we have shown that in wartime, the French cipher services had developed every skill available to win the SIGINT race. We have underlined the fact that although leading experts in cryptology, the French services were not working alone and had major exchanges with British and American cipher services, and that this flourishing alliance helped win the war. Finally, we've seen that even though the need for secrecy regarding the cipher services discoveries was still respected after the war, several icons emerged from the shadows, some of them even known outside of France. I sincerely hope my presentation was clear, and I want to thank you again for the opportunity of sharing this with you today. And without further ado, it is a pleasure and privilege to give the floor to General Jean-Louis Desvignes, our association president, who will take us through what happened during and after the Second World War.
Thank you, Agathe. Next slide, please. Here is the plan of my presentation. After the exploits of the First World War, I must unfortunately speak of a new dark period of French cryptology with the defeat of 1940 before evoking a real comeback in the second part of the 20th century. Next, please. Indeed, our victorious strategists in 1918 were certainly happy to have to remain discreet about the advantages that technical intelligence, and in particular the cryptology, had brought them. But alas, from discretion to oblivion, there was only one step, and our cryptology began to fail. Next, our army was therefore satisfied with the mechanical C-36 and electromechanical B-211 machines, next, provided by the Swede Boris Hagelin. These machines are fairly good quality, more or less to the comparison with the Enigmas, and were even easier to use thanks to their printing capacity. But like other military equipment, such as the radio sets, or more seriously, the planes or the tanks, they were badly used and were lacking in the dynamic war imposed by the enemy. While the Enigmas were following the tanks of General Guderian, next, please, the B-211 were fixed. In the great cryptological war against Enigma, the only real contribution of France was for the intelligence services, especially Colonel Bertrand, to have well managed the betrayal of Hans Thilo Schmidt, the one that David Kahn himself described as the greatest spy of all time. Next, please. This contribution has sometimes been minimized, but it's difficult to argue that the regular delivery of Enigma's instruction manuals and key tables has not been a significant advantage for its cryptanalysis. By the end of the war, French cryptology was at its lowest. Next, please. Our awakening was brutal when in 1956, the British revealed that they cannot embark with us on the reconquest of the Suez Canal, nationalized by Nasser, if we used the old machines of Mr. Hagelin. They read openly, just like the Americans who had evaluated them. Then the French government decided to make an effort in this much neglected area. France was not alone in having to reinvent its cryptology because the equipment inherited from the Second World War were no longer adapted to modern means of communication. In 1957, a competition was launched between its three services, while at the same time, NATO launched a competition to renew its rotor machines. In France, it's the army machine called Myosotis. Please, next slide. the first electronic machine which won thanks to its cryptological performances, its ease of use, and its limited size an essential factor for the land forces. In the meantime, this machine was successfully passed the evaluation test by SICAN. In the NATO competition, confronted with the American KW7, the British Alvis, and the German Elcrobox, it could not win essentially for political reasons. But its approval by the military committee was a first success. It will equip all French services and diplomacy, and it proved to be excellent and very reliable. It's so, moreover, that I owe my being among you. Indeed, when I was a young lieutenant, my colonel visited my cryptotelegraphy shelter when the myosotis had just died out. Disaster. I did not know anything about it yet, but I still managed to find the fuse which had simply unscrewed. Immediately, I was promoted to major cryptologist by this colonel and registered for an internship as a cipher officer, but I had managed to avoid until then. The rest is in my bio. Myosotis went through several decades without problems, except for the case of the leaks of its associated teleprinter discovered in our Moscow embassy during the Cold War. We are not the only ones to have been victims of this kind of trap on the part of the Soviets. During a border-crossing warfare of a spy film, with the complicity of the small virtues and strong drinks, the capacitor of the teleprinter power supply was replaced by an identical component containing, in fact, a compromising signal amplifier. It allowed the clear text of our diplomatic dispatches to be collected remotely. Now, next, please. Two events that boosted French Army telecommunication. In 1965, General de Gaulle announced its intention to withdraw France from the integrated organization of NATO. Consequence, our forces, which relied for their telecommunication on those of NATO mainly established with American equipment, were quickly going to have to fend for themselves. In addition, 3 years later, in the 1968 protests leading to a general strike, raised awareness of the vulnerability of government communications. For instance, General de Boissieu, son-in-law of General de Gaulle, tells us that he found himself unable to call the commander of the French forces in Germany to warn him of the arrival by helicopter of his father-in-law. Shortly after these events, it rained gold on the Signal Corps so that they realized a strategic network capable of resisting a war, but also this situation. It was named Ritter, and a little bit later, the need of data transmission conducted to a new secure packet switching network, Retinal. But in the first time, it's a tactical network whose studies had already begun, which was the subject of the greatest effort. Our country then had state-of-the-art public and private research. From the middle of the 60s, new communication techniques appeared. Digitization, modulation by pulse code, electronic switching, multiplexing, etc. At the same time, at the doctrinal level, the possibility emerged of replacing hierarchical networks by nodal or zonal network, offering a greater resilience. This is how will be born a revolutionary network, RITA. Please, next slide. At the time, it was the first digital network with services integration, telephony, telegraphy, fax, and soon data, secured by bulk encryption and allowing connection of mobile subscribers by cipher radio. In short, a GSM network 20 years in advance. Okay, the telephone set did not yet fit in a jacket pocket. Next. A little bit heavy. But this system placed France ahead of the old Western countries, so much so that, renouncing its own project, the American Army adopted it to carry out its MSE network. Ronald Reagan himself decided in its favor in spite of the pleas of Margaret Thatcher, who was dreaming of making him buy Ptarmigan, the British competitor. I had hardly participated in the success of RITA except by demonstrating its ease of use. When it was delivered to the French forces based in Germany, I was asked to carry out the recipe and to give my opinion. The absurd idea came to me to have this recipe carried out by a troop of 50 area reservists whose training went back several years and to whom we usually only entrusted outdated equipment. I was called crazy, of course, but bingo, it was a great success. Before the end of the day, I reported to my general that all the connections had been established with disconcerting ease and that I was going to send back to their homes enthusiastic reservists ready to face the Varsovie Pact in excellent condition. Then we regularly received visits from foreign authorities who discovered that this modern system was also already exploiting the digitization of the terrain. That said, the system was not without flaws. First, it was built on specific components and therefore very expensive. To be a pioneer, we bet on standards and we were wrong. For instance, the PTT chose a digital sampling at 64 kilobits per second and we 48. As a result, the terminals were specific at a time when the same commercial items saw their cost drop drastically. But above all, from a security point of view, RITA was built as a fortress, a closed one supposed to be easier to protect inside. But when it was necessary to communicate with the outside world, it was risky. It was a lesson for me. However, it is said that this reckless facility was a determining factor in the American choice. The US general, who had come to test the system in a large forest of the east of France, suddenly needed to contact his secretary at the Pentagon. No problem. He was instantly given the communication, loud and clear. It was ecstasy. Now, the strategic network RETINAT. Next slide, please. In 1979, I found myself project manager of the network of transport of digital information of the Army, RETINAT. To begin, a hard question, what type of network to choose? At the time, the success of RITA led its supporters to swear by circuit switching. It was already difficult to explain the best way was now packet switching. Once this agreed, another terrible question. Virtual circuit are favored by the PTT or datagram invented by your compatriot Louis Pouzin. Next, photo of Louis Pouzin with the Queen. This last type, adopted by the ARPANET, was enough to seduce militaries. It was reputed to be able to resist a nuclear destruction of one or more nodes. However, the echoes coming back to us on existing model did not seem reassuring. The quality of service and routing reliability, even in calm weather, left some time to be desired. The error rate appeared prohibitive for a network carrying encrypted information. The sacrosanct requirement of binary integrity did not seem reached. In contrast, the Transpac public network, widely deployed internationally, implementing demanding mechanisms to achieve an error rate of 1 in 10 minus 9. This was a decisive asset at a time when the low power of users' machines did not allow them to compensate for network imperfections. It seemed to me better to begin by ensuring the perfect functioning of the network in normal time than to succeed in making it survive in the middle of a vitrified country. I therefore chose the X25 protocol, promising myself to respect the standard as best as possible in order to use the maximum of standard components and even off-the-shelf equipment. Next slide, please. To guarantee the security of the network against malicious acts of piracy, all its management was protected by the encryption of exchange between the switches and the management center thanks to a crypto module connected directly onto the motherboard of the switches. The security of the support was ensured by the redundancy and the variety of these. The security of exchanges between subscribers was entrusted to the Capucine X25 crypto equipment I am going to present you. Next. Retinat, next. Retinat was produced on time and within the planned budget and did not experience any operating incident. It remained operational for about 20 years and when the time came, facilitated the inevitable switch to the Internet protocol at the end of the next century. I would add that in 1991, I had the pleasure of receiving a NATO delegation at Mont Valérien in Paris to present this network to it. Among the delegates were many former colleagues of the AXA, whose ears I had broken by boasting of the fruit of the French genius. Now, Capucine. Next slide, please. As I remember, when packet-switched network came on the AXA agenda, few encryption specialists knew what we were talking about. I had to use some drawing to explain the originality. At the input, a data stream is injected in the form of packets cut according to the protocol. This data is unpacked and then encrypted, repackaged, and finally re-injected into the network, the routing data having been preserved. Of course, the realization is more complex. Respecting the standard, the equipment could be used on all national and international X25 networks. This ability facilitated the rise of the military network, the transition from one medium to another being done without impact for the user. Approved by the French SCSSI to transmit classified secret defense information, Capucine was proposed and approved to protect the same level of information for the Western European Union. After a new evaluation conducted by a German agency, the BSI. It was the first equipment to undergo this double European assessment to compensate for the absence of a European agency equivalent to SICAN. The same process will be applied later for the Equinox IP encryptor from Thales, chosen by the European Union, but this time it was reassessed by the British agency CELG. Next, please. Okay, this is Equinox. As we have seen, the obligation of flying with our own wings had allowed to shine in terms of secure military telecommunication, and not only with the systems I have presented. But these successes in the military field are only a small thing compared to the phenomenal success made by the invention of the smallest cryptographic device of the moment, the smart card. I could not approach this subject without a certain emotion because its inventor, Michel Hugon, next slide please, died on last December without his merits having been recognized at their fair value. Only Arxi paid tribute to him immediately because he was one of our own, and because Michel was the victim of a striking injustice that we try to correct each time we have the opportunity. Indeed, an impostor who sneakily gleaned some information from Michel's company had managed to file a patent for a simple memory card. A skillful communicator, this usurper was able to benefit from media support, which earned him the title of inventor of the smart card. Michel Hugon was a brilliant engineer from the Bull company. He was in fact the first to succeed in installing a real computer on our small pieces of plastic, paving the way for the development of an industry that would float the planet. His first big success was the CP8 banking card in 1986. He is the source of many patents, but has always recognized what he owed to his predecessors. Please, next. Today, tens of billions of cards are used in the world in all areas: SIM card, banking card, health card, identity card, etc. Next, please. Modestly, I had quickly identified the interest of this technology for military cryptographic equipment in order to secure their keying. The solution had indeed appeared to me as the most effective way for a very low cost, provided that this card was really secure. Fortunately, the information technology security criteria were to be established. First, TC-SEC, then IT-SEC, and finally, common criteria. Next, please. Is a good photo of the signature of mutual recognition agreement. Our country then chose the smart card as the preferred field of application. New military crypto equipment were gradually designed by integrating this solution. First used for classical symmetrical systems, it is now used in systems using a PKI system. Next, please. Just a story. In 1986, the agenda for a bilateral meeting with the NSA included the smart card. We were a little surprised to find our CP8 card fast to a kind of calculator with largest case for the elder line. I think that we were not taken seriously. However, a few years later, when I made my farewell tour, what was my surprise to hear my American colleague asking me if the SCSSI could give him the benefit of our experience in card matters. The US government has decided to provide all its agents with a smart card. Too happy to be of service to the prestigious agency, I answered positively, of course. It had certainly come back to the ears of my friend that large Asian and even American semiconductor firms, such as Motorola, were calling on us for initiate the certification process of their chips. This is probably what explains why Barbara McNamara, at the time number 2 of the NSA, introducing me to her new director, General Hayden, specified, you know, the SCSSI is a very small agency, but it does a hell of a job. Today, the smart card faces competition, in particular, in the most widely used application, the SIM card, which is now integrated into the components of communication devices. But in other applications used for identity checks, in particular passport, CI, I'm sure the smart card will continue to thrive. It is on this hope that I finish my speech and give the place to a video record of Jean-Jacques Quisquater. Next slide, please. Jean-Jacques, an undisputed specialist not only in smart cards, but in everything related to cryptology. He was made an honorary member of ARXI a dozen years ago. As he has often cooperated with French researchers and industry, he has spontaneously agreed to talk to you about the most recent successes of French research. Thank you for your attention. Jean-Jacques is perhaps in the waiting room.
Hello, thank you very much, Jean-Louis, for the introduction. And right now we will speak about, again, smart card till today. Okay, let's go. So again, Michel Legon, the inventor of smart card with microprocessors. You see here the first one, the so-called SPOM, with very few memories. The main problem was really the RAM, 36 bytes. It's not a lot, as you can imagine. And in fact, the next version in the center was with a RAM of 52 bytes. And it was enough, together with the ROM of 2K bytes, to put there the DES and some operating systems. And it was finally the smart card TB100, T for TIT from Philippe Guillot from Bull, and it was a lot of use for that. Many things were done with the cooperation of Louis Guillot, and there was a paradox at that time because cryptography was mainly for administration, army, and diplomats, but the smart cards is cryptography in the pocket of everybody. So you can imagine there was a lot of problems, but it was solved because industry is an important point. Cooperation was very close between Michel Legon, Louis Guillot, and myself, and one important contribution was in the book, IEEE book, by Gustav Simmons, to introduce in a long chapter about smart cards. So this was very important, and it was in 92. There was also a lot together of protocol, the so-called GQ, also GQ2, and it was really used by Novell for many applications. And it was in the 90s and later. We did also some definition and a new algorithm for explaining their knowledge, the so-called Alibaba cavern, for instance. So now we can see the introduction of cryptography into France. I am speaking about the civilian cryptography. The first conference about cryptography was done for France in Paris in 84. And you can see that in the table of contents, there was only two people, one from industry, Regio, and RI from university. but the main point was participating was the last session. There was 5 talks about smart cards. It was not really research, it was more a description of ideas and product. But the main talk, the last one, was given by Louis Guillot, and it was very important because it was the first time that somebody publicly speak about cryptographic algorithm into smart cards. And the talk was the beginning of the story with DES smart card and RSA smart card. The next one in France, Eurocrypt, was in 95. Again, Louis Guillot and myself. And you see here from the last time for that conference, this time there was 5 people. Okay, so it was growing, and finally, the last time that Eurocrypt was in France, in Paris, in 17, this time there was 15 authors. So it's really growing. Maybe we have to think why. And in fact, it was because teaching cryptography at the beginning in the 80s was not easy, and there was only one location in Limoges, the so-called Cryptis from 86. It was mainly number theory at the beginning and opening more and more research about cryptography. And the main teaching location was in Paris at ENS Polytechnics. And from 91, it was organized by Jacques Stan. At that time, the main teacher was me, and this filière, so-called filière, was the main source of scientists about cryptography in France. And you can see here the list of each year. The first year, there was only one person, very important, we'll see later, and so on and so on. And all the people important till 2010, I can say, are coming mainly from here. Well, you know, there is an internal association about cryptologic research, IACR, and the president today is Michel Abdallah till the end of this year, and it is coming from ENS. There are also 4 fellows for that organization. Jacques Stern, again, Antoine Joux, was the first student from the DEA, Louis Guillot, again, and David Nakash. So you can see that Michel is a good researcher, doing many things and receiving an ASCR test of fame. Jacques Stern here, with two important books, hélas only in French at the moment. Antoine Jou receiving on the left the Gödel Prize, but also having a very important book about algorithmic analysis, and David Nakache, also at ENS, and with many phases of research. And we have also ANSI, National Agency for Information System Security, or to say that a little bit NSA, and Guillaume Poupard. And Guillaume Poupard was a very good student from the DA again. And you see at the right the list of the numerous papers he published. So it's important to see that at the head of ANSI, there is a PhD with a lot of papers. Now we can go around today. So there are a lot of research about post-quantum computers, and we need for that good algorithm. Yes, quantum research is to be and not to be together in some sense. So there is a core by NIST. There were several rounds, and we are today at the round 3, and we can see a lot of submission. And from the round 1 to 3, we are going from 55 to 7, and it is interesting to see that there are many works and panels and so on about that, and NIST hope to publish draft standards in the few next years. And you see also the link from ANSI about the view about that, about the post-quantum cryptography transition, because it's important to come from AES, RSA, elliptic curves to your algorithm. It's not easy. Recently, the list of the 7 candidate was published. You see the list here, and you see that 5 of 7 algorithms include people from France. So it's a lot of people, and in fact, there are more because there are also alternate version, maybe not to be standard in the next time, but maybe later. So the conclusion for my part is France is again at the center of research, design, application, production. It was done first using an high-level teaching with very good people, it's important. And then these people were put everywhere in France and outside, Grand École, universities, research labs, companies, administration, services, and so on. And as you can see, a very good result was obtained in about 20 years of efforts. And thank you very much.
Thank you for those presentations. They were very, very good, very interesting. We have several questions to get to, so I'll just start by reading off the first question, and I think this one is for any of the panel members that would like to respond. Tony asked, what cryptographic and SIGINT museums exist in France today? When will a new museum emerge? And how can the French and US history communities better collaborate in the future?
Okay. It's a question for me.
Yes.
Now there is no crypto museum. It's our dream to realize one, but we are looking for a place to have it. And we wish to find a place inside a great museum existing, because it's less expensive to to have a little place inside. I saw several museums. I think to the one of Munich, the Dutch Museum, for instance, with Carola, who is in charge of it, and the crypto gallery inside this museum is very well, and I know that she is working for a new gallery, a new exhibition. I did not see it, the new, but this is the solution we are looking for. Of course, if we were very rich, we cannot realize a museum like Bletchley Park or the Spy Museum, all the big museum. But it's a pity France has no place for crypto actually. And we are going to begin by a virtual museum, but I hope to put our, because we have a good collection of equipment, you see, and we have also ideas for this museum, but it's difficult to find partners and money.
All right, thank you for that. The second question is from Grant. He said, and please forgive me, I'll probably pronounce this name wrong, were any of the ciphers developed by Félix Delestel ever used by a military or government service to protect their communications?
I don't remember exactly what is I don't think so, in fact, but I'm not sure of that. I think it has been published in a journal, and I don't think it was really used, for example, during the First World War. But it is in the family of a cipher that was, in fact, used during the war. The cipher, German cipher designed by Nebel, for example, were based on a mix of a transposition and substitution. But in fact, I don't know if it was really used by governmental protection, for governmental protection. That I don't think so.
Okay. All right, thank you. This is sort of a long question. And I don't have a name, but it says in 2008, French historian Georges-Henri Soutou revealed that the French Foreign Ministry had used a German World War II cipher machine in the 1950s and 60s, the Siemens and Helska T52, despite being warned in 1954 by NATO that it was vulnerable. Can any of the panel members provide any more information on that incident?
Which machines?
Siemens.
Siemens.
The T52?
Demande de répéter la question.
T22 en 52. T52.
Ah, T52. This is a German machine. Yes,
Yeah.
the big one.
Siemens.
T52 was attacked by the Colossus.
Non.
Non?
C'est la machine de Lorentz.
Oui,
C'est ça, la T52.
je crois.
D'accord.
Et is T52 the machine of Lorentz?
The Lorentz cipher.
Was that for me?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. They're asking about the German World War II cipher machine in the 50s and 60s, the Siemens and Helska T52. And the person said that NATO warned in 1954 that it could be vulnerable. And does anyone have any information on that incident?
No, we have T52 in our collection, but we do not use it to communicate.
Okay. All right. The next question is from Richard. It's for General Desvignes. Is the Myastis equipment you've shown possibly displayed in a museum or perhaps within DGSE in France? I think you may have answered that already,
Yes,
but
yes. Of course, we are trying to interest to this project our colleagues of DGSE and ANSI, of course, but they are not yet convinced of the utility of this project. You see.
Okay.
But we are going to continue to persuade them to work with us. And we wanted to make this museum in Paris because it's here that there is a lot of people. But if we don't find a place in Paris, we are looking for other areas like the Normandy, where there is a big interest for all what is memorial, thanks to the D-Day, and etc. You see, we are very soon on the 6th of June, and there is already many people in the Normandy coast who is visiting all the places where there are. Each year there is a new museum which open, and recently we have loan an Enigma at the Canadian Museum of Juno Beach, you see, and they are actually they ask us to make a conference on the Enigma because this Enigma is very interesting for all the people who come, and I think we would have more frequentation in Normandy than perhaps in a bad place in Paris.
I have a question I'd like to ask about World War I and going into World War II. During World War I, the French, were very prolific and taught the Americans a lot about this. What was the relationship like during World War II between the French and the British and the Americans with cryptography?
During the World War II, there is, it's difficult to say that, but there is always suspicion between the French forces and especially General de Gaulle and the American, and it's a fact. For instance, I was talking about the evaluation of the C211. During the war, the American, NSA, perhaps not the NSA, it does not exist, but the service asked to have the B211 evaluated. And the French gave the American a machine a little bit modified, you see? But when a real machine, a real B211 was captured by the German, and after captured by the American, they discovered that the B211 had been modified, and it was not to ameliorate, to improve the confidence, the trust.
If I can just add something, if you're done with it. I think that's what's interesting in secret alliances is that you have to trust someone you're not sure hasn't been reading your messages before, and it's difficult because in World War I, French and British services were friends and allies just for 10 years ago. It started just 10 years ago, and it was really difficult to build that trust. And I guess between the war eras, so 1920s, 1930s, this trust had to be rebuilt from scratch because during 20 years nobody was talking anymore to anyone, I guess.
I have something to say about the French, British, and American cooperation during World War II. There was a secret service under the Vichy government, which was cooperate with Bletchley Park until 1942. And the French were doing SIGINT operation and transmit the operation to Bletchley Park, for example. And there was another cooperation. There was a very small French team in Bletchley Park who was working in secret and with a mathematician and a linguist. And they were a very small team, but they were still working under the Free France organization. Yes. Until the end of the war.
Thank you so much for that. Bill put in the comment section, thank you all for the fascinating tutorial on some of the cryptologic personalities, failures, and successes that may be less well known. And just personally, I would say thank you very much. I learned an incredible amount from this. If anyone has last questions, you can put them in the chat and we will send them off to the panel after this. Do any of you have any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Est-ce qu'on a encore un truc à dire?
No, so
Enfin, thank you very much
Okay,
for your
thank
trust.
you.
And it was a wonderful experience for us.
Yeah.
Because it was our first time, and perhaps we will ask to come back.
Well, hopefully in 2 years. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Bye.